we had to go to cabinet to get an approval for the supercritical power stations because each supercritical power plant orders separately. So if you want to order them together, you're asking different companies to do it. You're saying, okay, I'll do it in the future. You're making a large amount of commitments. We needed a cabinet approval to say, okay, over the next 5 years, we will buy 20 supercritical power plants. And that got 4 international manufacturers to set up manufacturing facilities here, prices dramatically reduced. And that is what led to that 25+% price for electricity coming down to 25- price of electricity. Similarly in LEDs, as I said, we did 6 tenders. This was announced in advance. After every tender, we used to have a meeting with the manufacturers, tell them this is going to happen again and again and again. The issue of getting paid is important, so you need payment guarantee mechanisms. In all of these cases, there is some kind of a guarantee which is either backed by the state government or central government in some manner. Even if it's not a formal money guarantee, it's very often a comfort letter that if they're not paid, we will pay. That gives investors and particularly banks confidence to bring in money into these new areas. Easy and defined methodology to verify quality and quantity. This goes back to the point that you said there are cheaper LEDs available in the market, but again, you need to have a system that you can pick them up, send them to a lab, so you have to have labs where they can be tested. So that there is credibility both with the end consumer as well as with the manufacturer that this is a system that will deliver what it promises. We have found it very useful to have partial risk guarantee mechanisms for financial institutions. What this does is that there is a sum of money, and this money has been, sometimes it's from the budget, sometimes it's provided by the Global Environment Facility that was talked about. It's a sum of money, and banks essentially buy guarantees from this money when they lend to one of these kinds of projects. The point being that if you don't get paid, some percentage, typically 50% of the non-repayments would be paid to you. It increases their comfort in lending into these new sectors. And the last point which was mentioned is information. It has been, Pierre mentioned it earlier. The point simply is that as you do these experiences and you want large scale replication, it is important that the investor next door also knows about it. How do you make sure that happens? How do you make sure that she does not have to invest the same amount of time in learning all the ropes as the previous ones? In all of these cases, the cases I talked to you about, standard agreements have been made. They're revised periodically, but they, in a sense, capture the knowledge till today. Banks have a standardized methodology. Banks are very good at that. Very importantly, you know you have won when a bank says, I've created a risk assessment methodology for my investment officers. Then it's going to happen. And finally, what does matter is the kind of interest rate that you provide. This is something that Dr. Bhattacharya was mentioning. I'm not going to go over the numbers again. He was very eloquent about them. But all of this can be great. But if you have to borrow money at 13%, well, I would rather put up a coal power station rather than a wind power station. Consequently, mechanisms which can help bridge the large difference in interest rates will clearly help in helping large-scale replication to occur. And whether that money comes from the Global Climate Fund or as my minister has been working on, that you charge a little bit extra from the consumer, put it into a fund that takes care of the risk. The key issue in say, dollar-rupee hedging risk is really about the spikes. On a 10-year basis, typically the rupee-dollar depreciation has never been more than 2.5% to 3% a year. But it's the spikes which make it troublesome. And because the because the commercial market hedges are typically for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year time frames, they are unable to provide the 10-year horizons that we are looking at. So possibly this is an area of public sector intervention. I'd like to end with 2 messages. The first message has to do with the fact that public sector is very important in creating the lead. The risks that we talked about inhibit private sector from being the first player. It's not that they aren't. In many cases, they are. In wind, they were the first players. But with the public sector coming in a sense, they become market creators. They become the creators, most importantly, of the knowledge and information which helps the private sector as it comes in to feel safe about investing in these technologies. And the last point that I would like to focus on is look at the examples. Wind, supercritical coal generation, LEDs. We have done all of them, but not for climate reasons. We have done them for reasons of energy security. We have done them for reasons of enhancing energy access. We have done them for reasons of enhancing particularly urban air quality. However, in all of these, there is a huge co-benefit of mitigating climate change. What technologies will work in India and other developing countries are those which provide here and now benefits. And in addition, have climate change co-benefits. Flipping it around will not work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ajay. So he said he was an engineer. You disagree, right? Okay, I think we've run out of time, but it will be a shame not to interact in this such brilliant panel that we've assembled. So I will resist the temptation to make any comments or try and integrate what the speakers have said, but clearly there's a lot of common ground between the speakers, not the least the market failure and as Ajay said, the kind of the greater good or the greater goal that you want to achieve, if you keep that in mind and try and address the market failures through government policy, through risk sharing, through pricing, through carbon pricing. One of the market failures that clearly is difficult, or not market failure, one of the things difficult to address is the interest rate, but the other market failures can be addressed by having some of these, as Ajay said so eloquently at the end, don't look at climate as the goal to start with. It should come out in the wash as a co-benefit. Get your policies right and climate benefits will follow. I think that's a very good approach. And ICRIER certainly endorses that approach because our first report was based on that. May I throw the floor open now? We'll take questions together. Yes, we'll take 5 questions and then I'll get the panelists to respond.
My name is Krishan Khanna. Question to Mr. Mathur. You did not want to talk about solar energy, I noticed. So I wanted to know, is there any reason? Because there are a lot of private investment going there and the numbers have gone up to 100 gigawatts now. Thank you.
One question to Mathur and master to Amar Singh. Sir, how you are dealing this disposal of this lead? Because this is a health hazard. Second, Mr. Amar, it's established that CNG is also equally harmful because small molecule of less than 2.5 mm is much more harmful to lungs. It's very painful in Delhi.
Thank you. The G20 have 2 working groups. One is on the commodity and energy pricing, which also has a green energy element. And there's another one on climate finance. Can the panel give us an assessment as to what has been the outcome of their efforts till date?
I'm Professor Anil Srivastava, from editor from International Bureau. My question to Dr. Ajay Mathur. One question you are talking about some device which reduces the electricity bill. What is you told during your lecture, there's some device if you use, it reduces the electricity bill. And number two, all the episode is the whole country or something in northeast states also. In Nagaland, Mizoram, Meghalaya, Manipur, those areas, there's a mass deforestation climate that is there. They're doing Zoom deforestation.
No, I'm
Zoom
sorry, I didn't get your question. The second question?
About your activities in northeastern states. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm Praveen Verma from TERI. Firstly, just to take on from what Mr. Mathur has said, that it's here and now. The criticality is the availability of the energy to the masses. Wouldn't just coordination amongst finances being one aspect, wouldn't coordination of the knowledge capital amongst the G20, which would in effect bring down the cost of the clean technologies, per se affect the mass adoption of these clean technologies? This is to the panel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we've got about 5 questions. We'll come back if we have time. Let me start in reverse order. Ajay, since most of the questions were directed to you, can you start the answers? Yeah, thanks.
I could have spoken about solar energy, it just would have taken more time. But more importantly, solar is still work in progress. We have, I think, 1,500 or 1,800 megawatts of solar already in, so it's on a very fast growth curve, but I would still wish to have a little more time before there are enough experiences and lessons that I can draw in on the same level as for the other 3. On the issue of disposal of LEDs, LEDs are completely electronic items. So what we have done is we have brought them under the electronic waste rules. So what has been, the draft rules that are out is that the manufacturer has to take responsibility for their collection and for their ultimate disposal. This is the Ministry of Environment's electronic disposal rules. As far as the G20 panel is concerned, we have been somewhat associated with the financing panel and also to some extent with the energy efficiency panel. This also leads to the question that you asked about can the knowledge capital help? That's exactly what the panels do. What you do is both the panels have worked on the principle first that there were a lot of case studies that were provided by countries. That helped us pull in the kinds of lessons that could be of use beyond that country itself. It has also led to all kinds of other interesting things. There's another organization, it's not a G20, but similar to that, called the Clean Energy Ministerial. It's 23 countries who together account for 80% of the energy consumption in the world. In May this year, when we met in Mexico, what we agreed was we will collectively commit that in 3 years, we will help create a sales of 10 billion LED bulbs across the world. This provides a signal, it provides a global supply chain to develop and investments to occur. And obviously each country does its own things as we are. We are looking to complete 1 billion of the 10 billion. The issue of the gadget which does this, that was purely for the purposes of illustration. Actually, what the person had been talking about was a bad experience that he had had with a variable frequency drive. But I didn't want to say what technology it was. The issue was that people are afraid of technologies coming in with which they are the first users and they find that it doesn't work. As far as Northeast is concerned, one of the things that we find is of great need there is how to use solar energy for heating. And therefore a number of innovative technologies which help that to occur are, we are trying to create a market so that a private sector supply of these technologies can occur there. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up a little bit on actually what Ajay said, which I thought was very important, that the primary motivation for action is not only here and now, but the benefits that accrue really to the country itself. Having said that, I mean, even if you take supercritical coal, the capital costs are very high. Okay? I mean, they are, you know, when you look at the supercritical coal, actually the capital costs are higher than for solar. So in a way, one area where the international community can help, in my personal view, is driving down the costs of finance. So why should they do that? Because even if the co-benefits are not the main, motivating factor for India, India is making a very big contribution by pursuing a particular strategy which warrants two types of cooperation: cooperation on finance and cooperation on technology. So I do believe that the international community does have a role to play, even if the primary motivation is that for driven by local benefits. Second, on the G20 working groups, actually the biggest G20 working group has been the infrastructure working group, which has looked at, in some sense, the impediments and the actions on infrastructure and infrastructure finance, but where they have not really looked at, for example, the issues that were talked about, and that's one of the cases I was making. In terms of knowledge sharing, the G20 launched, and it has just been set up, a G20 infrastructure hub. It's going to be based in Sydney. It will bring together the governments, the private sector, and institutions. And it can actually serve precisely as a repository, as well as a catalyst of the kind of knowledge. And by the way, as Pierre was saying, this very important function of information, both with regard to metrics, benchmarks, and the like. Again, we are pushing that hub should pay a lot more attention to these dimensions of sustainability. With regard to air quality and the factors that drive air quality, there are manifold. I mean, there are many, and Delhi is a good example. But just like Beijing shows, cleaning up the energy part of it makes a huge difference, and Mexico can make a huge difference to air quality. So I do believe that, the clean energy part, and this should not be even thought of as a co-benefit, because it is a here and now issue as far as India is concerned. So I certainly think the air quality issue should be a primary motive for following a clean energy path. Thank you.
Thank you, Amar. I don't think we have time for any more questions. We've already eaten in not only into the tea break, but also into the time for the next session. But we will give you, we'll not stress you out too much. We'll give you about 5 to 7 minutes for a coffee break, and then we'll start the next session. But before we do that, I'm not going to summarize. It was an excellent session. I hope the air quality of Delhi triggers us into action, as I think it will, because discourse has begun, at least in the popular media in India, on the need for driving a cleaner energy policy. Let me thank Amar for having come all the way from Washington to be here with us, and his contributions were, of course, immensely valuable. Thank you, Pierre. And thank you, Ajay, and wish you all the best in your transition. And will you join me in giving them a big round of applause?